Your mum, who I don't know much about, Anna Pavlova, is about as near as I can get
Yeah,
to
well,
your mum.
she was a ballet fan, you're absolutely right. She was a ballet fan, she was a theatre fan. My interest in theatre, I'm sure, comes principally from her. And we went in my really very early youth to a lot of ballet, particularly because that was my first interest in the theatre, was actually in ballet. And I unearthed programmes that, in 1946 we went to Covent Garden and saw Margot Fonteyn dance in that famous Sleeping Beauty, which was the post-war thing, and I was 8 or 9, I think actually we went in 47.
Do you remember the first show you saw?
Ever?
Yeah.
In any point at all?
Yeah.
Yes, I think it was in the Women's Institute Hall in a village in Cumberland. And it was just, I think people got up and did things. And we were the children from the school and we did a little dance.
So this was you performing?
We performed and then of course we watched the rest of it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Right. So that's very
And
contemporary. Participation, bit of watching.
Yeah, that's right. It was a village, a sort of community activity, and I would think that would have been about 1944, 43.
And did you have like a wow moment when you saw, maybe after this, I don't know, maybe that was it, when you just sort of felt theatre is for me, or I had that. Did you ever get that kind of moment?
No,
or
I don't.
You just naturally.
I don't think. No, I didn't have that thing of I want to do that, which a lot of people had, which Philip always said it was when he saw the walk down in the pantomime at Birmingham. And he said, very surprisingly, the princess came in a black dress at the walk down. Seems most unlikely, and he said, going back, I realised that was what I wanted to do. I didn't have that. I think it sort of grew on me more gradually.
But it was organic. It was in your family because your dad
father's a musician.
Your father's a musician, and he's obviously playing. And Elgar, Vaughan Williams.
Oh yeah, it was talked about, and we sang Mozart round the piano and all that. I was very, very incredibly lucky. This was my growing up period was really in Winchester, because he was the last of his public school music master jobs was Winchester College, and so we did, yes. In my little piping treble, I sang Voi che sapete. Yeah.
Wow.
And my brother also had a very, very good voice, and so we sang a lot and carols around it. Yeah. That was the background. And my father also conducted in Winchester one of those sort of orchestras which is talented amateurs plenished by good professionals. And Isabel Bailey came and sang. So the Creation, the Verdi Requiem, Acis and Galatea, the B minor Mass were part of what, amazingly, one's bringing up was.
And so you had culture coming out of your ears?
Yes, really, yes. Rather too much, really. Yes, and I suppose that's true. And the theatre going in Winchester was interesting because it doesn't happen anymore. The Salisbury Rep, which of course still goes, the Salisbury Arts Theatre, they toured in those days, and they came to the Winchester Guildhall, which was a slightly, very sort of typical Victorian Guildhall with quite a small stage, but big enough. So I saw a lot of plays. I saw my first Taming of the Shrew there. I saw the Family Reunion. We must have gone pretty regularly. I would think they probably came round about once a month or once every 2 months. And I think they did more places. I think they started in it's not a scheme that exists anymore now. So I was seeing quite a lot of theatre. Well, I was extremely lucky, as I have been all my life, amazingly lucky. I was a day boy at a private preparatory school in Winchester, which still goes, called the Pilgrim School, which was very good, and I just walked the 300 yards home each evening at 5 o'clock and went up. Then it was a fantastic education. It was very, very academic. It was really a feeder school for Winchester College, which of course, as you know, has the sort of highest academic level of any school. I decided to go, well, I didn't decide, but my father had been the music master at Harrow, and my brother, who was older than me, wanted didn't want to go to a school where his father was teaching, but was perfectly happy to go to a school where his father had taught. So we went there, and also, again, luck. The only way we could possibly have afforded it was that there was a reduction for the children of staff. So I was educated completely out of my sort of economic level. Both of us were. It was incredibly lucky. My brother was at Harrow before me, and actually we overlapped by a term or something. So you asked me what it was like. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much, but I did it the wrong way round. I enjoyed it less and less as it went on, really. And by the end, I really wasn't enjoying it, and I left early. But you're meant to play out and go to the end of your the summer term and that's when you took, in those days, your A levels. And I went back at the beginning of the Easter term in early January and thought, this is as much as I can deal with. And so withdrew in April, and actually by this time we were living in Glasgow, and then I sat my A levels actually as an external student at Glasgow Academy. Because I just went on studying, although I was at home. But so I got choked off with it. I think one of the reasons, of course, was that I had been brought up by adult people, and I found it's very interesting. My friends were all older than me, and I think I found, with some great exceptions, because there were some fantastic people, I think I found my contemporaries, because they'd come from being boarders at school, I think in my rather snobbish way, I thought they were a bit juvenile. So no, I had a good time, and there were fantastic teachers, and although I wasn't conventionally successful there because I wasn't a sportsman.
Well, that was Kim's question, were you bullied?
No, no.
It doesn't sound like it.
So interesting. All this talk about that, I don't know whether I have my head in the sand, but there really was not bullying in my time, in my house, and I don't think elsewhere in the school. I don't know why I'm so sad, because I know there was one case where somebody, not in any very dangerous way, actually sort of slightly beat up one boy, but it was one incident in 4 years, and it just never, it was just not on the horizon. It's so interesting.
Was it quite a liberal school in the way that public schools can have that liberal educational atmosphere, treating everybody older than they are, encouraging them to take part? Was it that
a little
sort of
bit?
environment?
Yes, I think so. Yes, I mean, I think we were. I think the staff, the masters, very much wanted us to be at the top of our game.
Yeah.
I mean, you weren't pandered to as a child.
Did you get the sense that you were being trained to be a ruler of the world?
You were certainly, leadership was, although it was never actually mentioned, was a very big deal. And one of the reasons I think that I wasn't successful there was that they didn't think I was one. So I wasn't as successful in the sense of being a house monitor or the head of the house or any of that. And I think it was that tipped me over when I came back, and I thought, oh, I'm not a monitor. Oh, to hell with this, I'm going. I really do.
But hang on, why did they not see what was obvious?
Because I probably didn't have it. I was very,
maybe not what they were looking for.
I
which
was
is
very
different.
gawky, and I'd shot up. I was grown very, very quickly, and I was very disorganised. I did actually do one little tiny bit of leadership, was that I fenced. Which was at that point a very small sport. Very few people did it. But actually, I became captain of fencing. But the point about the leadership was that I arranged, to go and Fence Against Merchant Tailors or whatever the other. So, and I did actually get that together, and the bus did arrive, and it did take us there, and there was a match. Do you know what I mean? And the fixture list went up at that time. So that was just the beginning. No, I think they would have said does not have leadership qualities. And then the big thing, which I didn't talk about, was the plays.
Yeah, well, quite.
But that was the beginning of it all, really.
We can start.
And I was thinking about this. You know, everyone talks about the one teacher who kind of changes your life, really. And I think I would have to say it was a man called Ronnie Watkins, who recreated in the speech room at Harrow the Globe, and he was part of that very big wave. Sam Wanamaker, what was the name of the other guy? Not Evans, gone. Who went into what the background of the Globe was, which of course finally resulted in the building of the Globe on the South Bank. And Ronnie was a great friend of Sam Wanamaker, and indeed there is a Watkins room, a rehearsal room or something at the Globe to this day. And what he did was he worked out that the big speech room, the sort of assembly room at Harrow is horseshoe shaped, and he realised that it was roughly speaking the same dimensions as the Globe. So he would fill in the bottom bit of the circle, and then he put gradually more and more. They got the doors, then they put the windows above the doors, then they did the terrace, the upstage level and the lower level and the curtains, and we did one Shakespeare play a year, and I did 4 of them.
And he was quite, from what I gather, he was an authentic. He was trying to be an authentic Shakespearean, but interestingly, from a dramatic or I don't know if you call it a dramatic or a theatrical point of view, it was how he staged things that was also very influential. I think very minimal.
Well, yeah, I mean,
in the way that Shakespeare would have.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and he did. And the great thing that, of course, I really learnt from him was the fluidity. That you must go from one scene to another. You cannot stop and do something else. So that you go off and the curtains part and Lady Macbeth is upstairs, or the curtains below part and there is somebody coming forward. So that it's always in motion. That it's never that there's never a kind of close the curtains, change the scenery, open the curtains.
So when you eventually catch up with Philip, who for him that is the sort of essence of theatre making, isn't it? Well, I don't know if that's the essence, but it's a sort of biblical commandment with him that there must be one set and that it can do everything and you keep the whole thing moving. So in a way you're coming together later on.
Absolutely.
But actually with this grounding curiously by this guy Ronnie Watkins who stumbles on it he doesn't stumble on it. He's obviously thought very deeply about it, hasn't he? About how Shakespeare staged his plays.
It actually has stopped now because, of course, now Harrow has got its own theatre and there's a massive drama. Yes. The problem with it was that there was almost no other plays, but that was where, and I did 2 women and 2 men in the plays, and I also did a tour at the end of my first year. It was my 3rd woman. I did Viola in Twelfth Night, which we toured to Germany, and we're now in 1952, 53, and we went to amazing. I know, just really what we described as just after the war. It was really very interesting. We toured around. I suppose we did 7 or 8 performances in different places.
Do you remember where?
Bonn, a school in Bonn, Bad Godesberg or something like that. Göttingen, I think we went to, a place, beautiful little village no one's ever heard of called Treiser in Hessen. We went round in a bus.
It's quite an extraordinary story in itself, isn't it?
Looking back on it, it was. But I think there was probably a great move to reconnect culturally, both them to us and us to them.
It was the Marshall Plan, wasn't it? To rebuild and all that. So it was part of the grand plan.
Yes, I think it must have been, because I went in 51, so 52 Yes, it would have been probably in the summer term of 52 or the summer term of 53, summer holidays of 53.
But even so, the thought of going to Germany at that time is such an intrigue. I wonder who came up with that bright idea.
One of the teachers, who actually directed that particular production. Ronnie didn't do that; it wasn't connected with him. Although, of course, we had all been in Ronnie productions.
And did you become aware of German theatre culture at that point? Or
Not
you were
really.
maybe
Not
performing?
Really. Not really, yeah. Right. And we were very, very young. Yeah.
And still, and how good were you? Not that one should say, but
Pretty,
still, how good were you?
I was okay, I think.
Yeah.
I had
Yes,
I did Helena and Midsummer Night's Dream.
Of course.
And then I did, which is a wonderful, wonderful part, Constance in King John.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a great tragic role. And then I did Borachio very badly in Much Ado About Nothing. And then I did Jaques in As You Like It, was my last one. Yeah.
All the tall, thin roles.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Did you think that early age in the 60s, I mean, what happened with John McGrath, who of course was at college with you, I think?
Yes, he was just, he was like Alan Bennett. He was doing postgraduate work.
Okay.
In my first year, and I think he then moved on.
Yes. Actually, let's just get a handle on who's there at the time. Who's at college at the same time as you? You've got your Dimblebys and...
David Dimbleby was in the same college as me. There was Ken Loach, Peter Snow, Dudley Moore was just leaving. Well, he was again doing postgraduate, as was Alan Bennett. That was the sort of time it was. And John, if we're moving into university, John did a production of, what did he call it? It was actually Ulysses. It was called Bloomsday, at the Oxford Playhouse with Ouds or one of those, and Liz played Molly Bloom.
Because she was there as well. His wife,
yeah.
Well, his wife to be, or
yeah.
I don't know
they were together, but they weren't yet married, I think.
You directed her later on in Men Should Weep. I know.
That's right. And she was doing her finals at the end of the first year, my first year, and John did what was at the time famous within university circles, a production of The Birds, which was in the garden, on one of the gardens of my college, and I played the leader of the chorus, the hoopoo, and at the end there was a sort of victory dance, and Liz came and danced with me because she couldn't be in the show because she was doing her finals, but she just came and we just did a dance done by, can you do Rex Nettlefold? An amazing guy who was a choreographer and then went back to Jamaica and became Minister of Culture there, and he was an extraordinary person.
Because that's the Jamaica is well, of course, your father as well.
Yes, and when I went out to Jamaica to see my father all years later, I met up with Rex.
There you go.
Yeah,
because Independence 1960.
And he did the choreography for The Birds.
Wow.
And that was fun too, because I was the link between the college, can we rehearse at midnight, and what's the noise, and when are we putting the scaffolding up, and will it, all those things that go on between an organisation which is having something like a play grafted onto it. So I had rather fun doing the sort of administration of that, and I was the go-between between Ouds and the college. And it was interesting because the reviews that we did in Edinburgh from Oxford, in those days the Fringe was very small, it was about a dozen things, but the Oxford Theatre Group had a really strong position there, and we played in the Cranston Street Hall halfway down the Royal Mile, and it was a very big deal. And out of that, I mean, the first review I did, Dudley did the music and Alan was in it, and I was in it, and Liz actually was in it. And then the second year, Alan and Dudley were in Beyond the Fringe.
There you go. So you were in the precursor.
Yeah, absolutely. And indeed, Alan on one occasion did one of the numbers from Beyond the Fringe in the review that we did.
And did you write some of that? Did you write some of it?
No,
Or you were in it, so you were performing?
No. And I did it actually for 3 years. I was in it the first year, I directed it the second year, and I was in it and directed it the third year. I always did the review, I never did the play, but the plays were a play by David Coate, who was a name you will know.
The historian?
Yes. A new play by John, called, I think, Why the Chicken? And I can't remember what the third play was an interesting play, Vasco by Shehardeh. Can you do that? Done by, again, a marvellous colleague, a director colleague of mine, Adrian Brown. We're getting too much detail. Go on. The first thing I directed was in my second year, and I did a production of Murder in the Cathedral with the college in that church there, right. And which was a little church in Oxford, just very, very small but very pretty, which had an odd link in that it was the church where my parents had been married. And
it's a small world, isn't it?
And it was, I mean, it was a distinguished cast, which included David Dilberby and Ferdy Mount, and Piers Plowright, who then became the head of drama on the BBC, who was Thomas Beckett and was absolutely marvellous. Beyond the Fringe was just after. And was the product of the work, because the Footlights had got Jonathan Miller and Peter Cook, and the Oxford Theatre Group had got Alan and, to a certain extent, Dudley. And
did you think you'd missed the boat because you saw these guys going off to Broadway?
No, because that was all. They were still there. You know, oh yeah, I suppose by the time they went to Broadway, I had left. I suppose I was already working.
And you were off because you were off to Barrow?
No, Carlisle
first.
Weekly rep, and meeting up with Robert David MacDonald.
Okay.
Who gave me my first job. Just glad to be working.
Right.
For £7.15 a week. Yeah.
£7.15 doing what?
Being an ASM. With Sheila Reid, actually, who has remained a friend, was the sort of juvenile in the company, and we did marvellous production of Julius Caesar. David did in Carlisle in Weekly Rep, but it was very, very good. I mean, I remember it. A sort of Nazi one, sort of Germanic one. It's very, very good. And we did. I was only there actually about 3 months. But we did Present Laughter, we did all sorts of plays, Hang Up the Trimmings, can't remember what else we did. Dandy Dick, in which I played Major Tarver, because of course one was an acting ASM. So we were running around on the bus trying to get a car pick to go in front of the gas fire and then coming back in and doing the part.
Digs and all that. Digs in
Carlisle. Digs in Carlisle, wow. And how.
And what was your first impression of Robert David MacDonald? Well,
of course, he was rather wonderful, because this voice on the telephone had offered me the job, and of course I had you see, it's always quite lucky. There's always a connection, because during the war, going way back before this story starts, we were evacuated, my mother, my brother and myself, to Cumbria. So of course I knew Carlisle slightly. So I was going to an area where, and indeed there was a friend of my father's who lived in Carlisle who was kind to me, and again, tea on Sundays.
It was pre-Cumbria, wasn't it? Cumberland then?
Cumberland, yes, it was. Yes, it was. Near Keswick we were brought up, which is why the first theatre show that I saw was in the Women's Institute Hall in Braithwaite.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Carlisle. Then the Old Vic, carrying a spear for 6 months.
How was that?
That was all right, except that none of the plays really worked, which was rather depressing. Looking back on it, they were actually rather wonderful, in fact. I mean, The Tempest with Alistair Sim, designed by Leslie Hurry. That's not chopped liver, although it didn't really work. It was a production of Richard III with Paul Daneman, with Eileen Atkins being rather wonderful as Lady Anne, and a Julius Caesar, in which I was, fourth plebeian on the right. But it was a rather, I would say it was rather a flat time at the Old Vic.
Why did these plays not work? You mean the production didn't work?
Yes, I don't know, there was just a sense that it wasn't, I'd have to look it up in more detail, but there was a sense that it wasn't a really prime time.
Who was directing then?
A guy called Oliver Neville, who then went on to run, I'm going to say RADA, but I've got that wrong.
But not inspired. I mean, basically, it
wasn't. He was fine. It just sometimes things just don't go right. And it seems to me at the time, and looking back on it, that although they were probably now seem rather interesting actually, because the Julius Caesar was done by a rather interesting Greek director called Minos Volanakis, who had worked a lot at the Oxford Playhouse and done things with the young Sean Connery and so on, and he'd done them while I was at Oxford, so I'd seen some of his work. He was really, but again, that's an interesting case. He would have been what you and I would call a conceptual director.
And can you remember what your aspirations were at that time? I know you just say just to work, but
yes, well, I was definitely, I'd already got my eye set on, I mean, from the very beginning of going into the theatre, I knew I wanted to be a director. That I remember absolutely.
Why?
Well, because it was the thing I'd enjoyed most at university.
More than acting?
Yeah. Yes, actually, on points, just yes.
But do both.
Yes, do both. Yeah,
ideally.
Which is what I've tried to do.
Yeah, very much
yes,
so.
Yeah.
Very successful indeed. So then you get a proper training as a director, well, whatever that means, at Oldham Rep.
Well, you see,
Carl
after the Old Vic bit, there was then a little bit of a. Oh no, there wasn't a bit of a hiatus, and then the great day at the Café Royal, where I got the ATV traineeship. And that was interesting because I think I'm right in saying we were the second year, because I knew about it just after I left Oxford and did the last review in Edinburgh. I heard about this and I applied too late. So I then did a year, which actually proved to be really good, because I did Carlisle and I did the Vic and I did a tour of a comedy for the West End, which was kind of disastrous, really, but in which I played the juvenile lead and met some very good friends, and it toured around, and so I've played the Streatham Empire and the Bristol. I mean, it did a big tour, I mean, a sort of 6 or 8 week tour. And it starred, now you'll not be able to do this, but someone who was a real name at that time. Can you do Anna Russell? She was a comedienne, and her big thing, and a singer actually, and her big thing was a spoof of Wagner. She did, and she had a huge career and could fill the Albert Hall doing The Ring in her version, which was extremely funny. And she was really a big success. I mean, a name. And this was her trying to do a play, and that didn't really work. And the play was, the real problem was not her, although she wasn't really an actress, she was a performer. But the trouble was the play wasn't really good enough. You know, Carlisle, Old Vic, spoof, I think it was that order. And then finally, yes, that is right, that's right, sorry. And then Oldham Rep, and I got it at the Café Royal on the same day that Trevor Nunn got his and went to Coventry.
Yes, went to the Belgrade, of
Belgrade,
course.
of course, and it was a marvellous. It was talk about the other end of the story. I mean, your cobbled streets and all this. Oldham was it was pretty sharp end, but the theatre, of course, played an incredibly important part in that society, and it was weekly rep, and people who booked F14 and 15 every Thursday, and there they were, week after week. And I worked again. I was so incredibly lucky because I think people slightly thought, because already weekly rep was just going out, and most people, I mean, Belgrade would have been 2 weekly, if not 3 weekly at that point. And I think people slightly thought that I'd got the short end of the lollipop, but it was exactly the opposite, because a lot of people who went to grander, there were 6 of us, I think, who went to what might be described as grander theatres, never got a chance to direct. Whereas in that year, I acted a lot. I would think I probably did 8 or 10 parts, and I directed 6 plays.
Right, and it's something about, once again, being outside, if one can call this, forgive me, Oldham, but outside the limelight, in a way.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what you're saying,
absolutely.
Isn't it? And you're away from it. You're not in the metropolis. You're
no,
out
and I'm
there
so lucky working with an amazing man, unsung really, called Carl Paulson.
Yes, Carl Paulson was your tutor, was your mentor.
Well, he was the artistic director.
Yes.
And what the real secret about him was that it was the whole package. You were in with the budget meetings, and he was very good. I think he made me do a sort of time with the stage management and so on, and also significantly, he was the one who said, stand in the foyer and welcome the customers, and be standing in the foyer to see them out. Which has became such a sort of facet of Glasgow, in which so many people who don't remember the plays at all remember that. But that's where I learned that. And he insisted that I did it.
And can you remember, that's fascinating. Can you remember other things that you brought with you that you've just sort of thought, yes, either against or because they did it that way, or because they didn't do it that way and therefore I'm going to do it this way? Can you remember things that were critical to your development?
Well, I mean, he taught me everything I knew, really. I mean, it was, and he was amazing. He could be extremely tough. And
you're capable of that, we know, all the time.
Right. Well,
yes,
maybe I learned that.
And yourself as not just
and it was weekly. I mean, we did 46 plays in the year.
Physically arduous, mentally
Yes,
arduous.
and to a very, very high standard. I mean, it was people now say, oh God, it must have been awfully tatty.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm sure sometimes it was. But you see, he was very clever because he had a permanent company. But if you and I were playing the leads this week, 2 other people played the leads next week. He almost never gave us enormous jobs, one on top of the other. So it was very skillfully organised so that Jean Rimmer and Kevin Lindsay would play the leads this week, and the next week it would be Colin Edwin and Liz Ashton. And the schedule was, the reading on the Tuesday morning, Act 1 on Wednesday, Act 2 on Thursday, Act 3 on Friday morning, run the show on Friday afternoon, run it on Saturday morning, dress rehearsal Monday afternoon, go up on Monday evening.
Talking of dress rehearsal, is that what it's called, or is Next Season by Michael Blakemore? I don't know if you've read
it.
Yes. But he describes that period, I think, and I mean, maybe thinly veiled Peter Hall, we don't know. Anyway, he's got, the thing that he describes there is the impact of these kind of very older actors. Who's actually directing the show? In his book, the suggestion is that the director, these university trained, very bright kids who come in, don't actually know what they're doing. Now, that's not true in your case, because you were obviously...
It wasn't, and also, you see, we used to use, and don't spurn it, we used to use the French's acting edition. So at the blocking, the actor would read, moves to sofa, and would move to the sofa. So the thing would block itself as you went.
I mean, Patrick Hanaway, I know he was characterising thumbnail sketch very quickly, but he has said, oh, Giles, yes, well, he's one of those French theatre, he follows the stage, he follows the the pattern of the play. He moves you, he blocks everything in the first few instances, and then you've got a very clear structure. Now, it wasn't a criticism, it was just a characterisation, which again I thought, yeah, okay, maybe. Anyway.
Yes.
React. Discuss.
Well,
rubbish. I mean,
no, not rubbish at all. I mean, it was interesting the way that worked. I mean, if you'll ask me what did I get from that, how you organise things, and he was very chary about making me the actual first production. I went there in November, and I didn't have a day or a night off till March. I was on if I wasn't on the stage, I was in the foyer and seeing them out. And of course there were some really wonderful actors who really knew how to do it. That was the point. They knew how to do a play in a week, even a big production.
And was the repertoire challenging? I mean,
there was a certain amount of drawing room comedies and North Country comedies, but I mean, I did the Waltz of the Toreadors, the Ennui. We did Henry V. We did
at your behest or his?
No, him. He did that. I mean, we would discuss it, but he knew the repertoire in a way that I absolutely didn't. I wouldn't have known. And we did things like quite a lot of comedy. Of course, I mean, The Reluctant Deb we did. 2 musicals. We did Grab Me a Gondola, and they had just done The Boyfriend. We did Salad Days, in which I was. Over Easter we did The Robe, for an interesting reason, that if you did a religious play, you could be open on a Friday and take the box office on Good Friday. But if you didn't, you had to be closed on Good Friday. So we did The Robe. And actually, it wasn't bad. It really wasn't. And the standard, and some of the actors were really great. And there were some really good performances. I did Come Blow Your Horn, the Neil Simon. I did a play which I can't remember. I think it was called Something Journey, which was about people behind the Iron Curtain. And I did the Waltz of the Toreadors. And the first one I did was a play, actually, it was a surprising play by Philip King, the man who wrote all the Sailor Beware.
Oh, no, yes.
But it actually was a play about gay lorry drivers.
Oh.
I know. It literally was about gay lorry drivers. And Carl did this, we are bifurcated, but I think it's interesting. What he said to me was, he said, we opened on the Monday night, whatever that play was. He said, now this play tomorrow. I've got to be away tomorrow morning. Just take the reading. Just do the reading. And of course, I'd been at all the readings. I knew how all that worked. So I got them in and said, let's start, and da-da-da-da. And then the next day he said, I've got to go to Manchester tomorrow. Just block Act 1. So I went in on the Wednesday and said, Carl's not here, but let's block it. And I blocked it. And the same thing on the Wednesday, and the same thing on the Thursday. And he came in for the Friday run through.
And?
Gave me a sort of bollocking note, actually. I can't remember what it was. And then, and I thought, I wonder what's going to happen. And then when the programme came out on the Monday, it had directed by Giles Havergal. It was so clever. So if it had been a balls up, he could have come in and it wouldn't have been any loss of face.
Yes, not unheard of.
Yeah. No, it's a very good way of doing it.
Yeah.
And then from then on in, of course, I got, as I say, so I left there with 6 productions under my belt, lots of parts, including, God help me, Henry V. And so, but also how to manage a theatre, how to run a theatre. I knew I never went to a board meeting, but I knew the chairman of the board very well. And so I was kind of hot to trot to run my own shop. And you see, this is a scheme that I think couldn't work now in quite this way, because there aren't the theatres to do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, with a little gap then, you went from Barrow to Watford.
Yeah, that was very quick, actually by chance. I left Barrow because that was which I ran as a weekly rep, and just the circumstances. But I did absolutely everything there. If you're doing the sort of theatre management question, I mean, I ran everything, and it was a tiny staff. I mean, it was the box office lady who did the wages and a secretary, and but we did some. I mean, Glass Menagerie, Tartuffe, Around the World in 80 Days, Ebb, Hay Fever. I mean, we did a really
so
good...
you prefigured all the shows that then became massive hits at the Sits?
Well, some, yeah. And David came and did Ebb. But it was a rather pretty theatre, actually.
This was Ebb Tide, Robert Louis Stevenson,
yes,
wasn't it?
Yeah. No, it was... I mean, it was a formidable experience. But I knew when to cut and run, really, to be honest. The finances became very, very dicey, and I created a completely new system of running it, which would have worked. And then it was one of those extraordinary things. I piloted it through the board, piloted it through the local authority, and then when I'd done it, I suddenly thought, I can't do this. So I just said, I'm going. It was then run by Donald McKechnie, who then became, after having done Barrow, then went to the National and worked with Olivier and directed, he became an assistant to Olivier and actually directed things at the National. It's still alive.
I mean, the interesting thing is that you've sort of slipped, haven't you? Here's this actor, director at university, then becomes a trainee director, sort of meets Robert David MacDonald, but you're becoming a director, and now you're becoming an artistic director, aren't you? The Barrow thing is not insignificant then, because it gives you...
Oh, absolutely.
You've got your hands on the tiller.
It's completely significant, because everything you had to
flows
do,
out of
everything,
Barrow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was like a dry run through for Watford, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of also, not only that, but also trying out some of these kind of productions, which are, as you know, become part of your life actually from now on, because they get repeated again and again, and the playwrights get repeated. So there's a certain taste that's creeping in.
We also did The Importance of Being Honest. So we did The Importance of Being Honest, Tartuffe, Round the World in 80 Days, The Shop at Sly Corner, Hay Fever, Ebb. There won't have been many more, because I think there would have probably been 8 or 10 productions in all, and then I left in a rather marked manner. I don't think it was probably it was just one of those things.
How would you characterise those productions? Did they have a strong design element? Did they?
Yes, I worked with a woman designer who did some really very good work there, called Jane Kidd, and she did, and there were one or two. I mean, David's set for Ebb Tide was a completely bare stage and a circle of sand and a pole. And rather wonderful it was, and the Tartuffe was just a sort of gauze tent with a tile floor. I mean, and 2 chairs, and in weekly rep.
And Watford is like the first big opportunity, no?
Yes, and it was
because it was a sort of,
and it was two weekly. You see, yeah, and it was interesting. It was interesting because it was a privately run theatre. I don't know whether it was weekly. I think maybe it had gone for it. And of course it was significant because it was run by Jimmy Perry, who then wrote Dad's Army, who left Watford. He and his wife ran the theatre, and then they went and he went on absolutely to become a household name. Heidi High, Dad's Army. And what happened was the council took over the theatre, and it became a local authority theatre, a civic theatre, and I was their first appointee. And indeed, in the first few months, while I was employed by them but hadn't actually moved into the theatre, I worked at Watford Town Hall. And then we did 4 years there, and that was where David and Philip came on board, because I had done an opera while I was at Oldham in the summer. I had done an opera with a friend of mine who was kind of crazy really, but he did opera in a barn. He had a house with 3 Elizabethan barns. I mean, all very run down, but he had done an opera the year before, and he asked me to direct 2 operas, actually, a short sort of curtain raiser, and then a sort of hour-long 18th century opera, very beautiful actually. And he said, and I would like you to work with the designer Philip Prowse. And we met at the Festival Hall, unforgettably. So I'd done that at Oldham. So when I went to Watford, I asked Philip to come on board, which he did, I think, pretty well straight away. No, not straight away. There was the first time I took my designer from Barrow, and then and then Philip came on board first as a guest and then permanently as head of design.
So first impression of Philip, you said unforgettable.
Oh, well, it was just an unforgettable meeting. I can still see the bit of the festival hall where we met, yeah.
And what was your impression of him?
Well, I don't know, you just think, oh, this is going to work, don't you, or something. I mean, you know. And I think also the thing was, we were already working. We were hired to do this opera, so we started talking about it, and
right, straight to work.
It was beautiful with nothing. It was just beautiful, and the costumes were fantastic. It was a three-handed opera, but based on Venus and Adonis, and we had a wonderful, actually rather quite famous mezzo called Nancy Evans, who was the wife of the man who wrote the librettos for Benjamin Britten, and she had been the first Nancy in Albert Herring. She was called Nancy actually, and we did 3 or 4 performances of these 2 operas, and it was wonderful.
Was that your first opera?
Yes. Yeah.
Because you're a big opera buff, aren't you? I mean, you've again grown up with opera.
Yes.
You're a big opera theatre director.
My father took me to see Tristan and Isolde, aged 11, at Covent Garden, with what is now, of course, a completely mythical cast of Kirsten Flagstad and Sets van Hom and so on. And I...
Blown away.
Amazing evening.
Even at the age of 11, not bored, just in awe.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I can see it. I can see all her 3 costumes. I can see all 3 sets, and I can see some moments. Yeah.
What is your? I mean, a banal question. Forgive me.
Opera.
No, because it's part of it.
Yeah.
And what is the big difference if you're directing theatre, directing opera? Is it the same?
Yes.
Is it basically the same?
Yes. It is really. Yes. Except you don't control the pace. Yeah.
Because that's the conductor.
Yeah. And the music is the composer, really. Yeah.
And your feeling about opera culture as opposed to theatre culture? I know Philip's got some quite... Well, I think maybe not so much... But yeah, he does have some strange things to say about singers, perhaps. But, compared to
I think
actors...
Yes, I think there's been a huge change from even when we started in opera. I think the whole theatre aspect of it is now much, much more important. And singers recognise that and want to do it, which is why I work at the National Opera Studios, to fast forward to now.
Exactly. Yeah, and you train them to do just that.
Yeah.
So you train them as actors to think.
Assist
and how does that... Can I just stick with that just for a second? Because that's, very lightly said and very, yes, I nod away, but actually there's a lot more to that than meets the eye, because the text does not work in the same way. It's not a text, for one thing, it's song. You're working through music, you're working through a different kind of language, in a way, to the language one's working in on stage, no?
Not really. No, it is. They're saying something to each other or to the audience, and yeah.
So what do you do when the opera singers say to you, but this is my high C, I couldn't possibly look at you right at this point, the other actor or the other singer, because I have to take that out to the audience?
They don't. So wouldn't ever dream of saying that.
Oh, they did to me, sorry.
Oh, did they? Oh, right. Oh, okay. Oh, right.
I said, yes, but you're supposed, this is your love mode. Surely.
Yes. But
that's not
of
your,
course,
not in your
of course, my theatre style has always been slightly turn it to the audience anyway. We always had I always remember Philip saying, in the Restoration Theatre on the Globe, you could not possibly have looked at the other actor, because if you took your eye off the audience, they would have started going crazy. So the whole idea is, I look at you while you're talking, but you talk to the audience, and when you finish, you look at me and I talk to the audience. But that simple point, I mean, you can battle with that at a drama school, with actors. I mean, even at the Royal Shakespeare. I mean, so often you just think, darling, turn it out. The audience totally accepts that when I'm talking to you, I'm actually talking to them, but I'm talking to you because you're looking at me. And then when I do that and you turn out, they understand that you're talking to me, although you're talking to them. I mean, this is exactly what I've just been doing at RADA with Marriage à la Mode. The thing is not to rubbish the truth at all, because this system needs the truth even more because you're looking at them. And if you're not being truthful, and if you just do that, play it out front, it becomes ham. And this is what was so interesting, actually, in this last project I've done, was saying to them, you have to do this big style, because a lot of it was a sort of Racinian tragedy in blank verse. But you have to feel it as well. If you just say it, it will become recitation.
Yeah.
But if you feel it, Anthony, am deeply in love with you, Cleopatra. I'm expressing it in this very oratorical way, but the feeling has got to be there. Sorry, the thing about Watford was, that it was all the management things that I'd got from Oldham and Barrow all fed into that. That suddenly one could be an artistic director and run a budget and do the publicity and order the Britvic and cast the plays and select the plays and all that. And of course the fun of that was building an audience and this extraordinary trick, really, which was to understand that you could get really wonderful actors to come to Watford for £20 a week because they could drive home in the evening. And thus, Constance Cumming, Christopher Gable, Maxine Audley, Harold Pinter, Vivian Merchant. I mean, the list goes on and on.
It's a roll call, isn't it?
But we also built our own stars, so that, and I'm sure this was happening there, that if you did Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf with Kevin Lindsay and Jane Lowe, you would pack out. Because you have to be careful that they don't just wait till Joe Soap from Emmerdale is in it. You have to build your. That's what happened there, and we did. And there was some really very, very good work there. I thought Watford was rather wonderful.
Well, so did the critics. I mean, this is when your first real acclaim came, didn't it? In Watford, we have somebody here. This Giles Havergal is a director of note. He's got taste. He's bringing a brilliant repertoire. You are beginning to establish.
Well, it began to become quite well known, because we did things like, and again, Philip was very instrumental in this, the first production of Sweet Bird of Youth, with Vivian Merchant and Christopher Gable. Christopher Gable came to us because of Philip working in the ballet, and then he jumped ship and became an actor, and indeed his first theatre role was with us. He came and did Dorian Gray, and then he came back and did a lot of acting in not necessarily leading parts. He was wonderful. Do you remember him? He was very, 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 very handsome, and he'd been a leading dancer at the Royal Ballet.
Oh, absolutely. Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
sorry.
Funny enough, I was just dwelling on Moira Shearer later on in the story.
And he then, of course, went on, stopped being an actor and went on and ran Northern Ballet.
Yeah, and it's quite rare, isn't it, in my experience? I mean, that's why, the Christopher Gables, the Moira Shearers, there are not many, in my experience anyway, dancers who can do both.
It's quite difficult.
It is quite
Actually,
unusual.
there was a marvellous actress who came to work with us in Glasgow towards the end of the time, who had been a lead at the Sadlerswells with the Birmingham Royal, and she could do it. And then Christopher did Nipple in Little Malcolm in his Struggle Against the Eunuchs. He played the boy in the rehearsal. He did quite a lot of things. And then he did Chance in Sweet Bed of Youth with Vivian Merchant.
Right. Talking of sorry, go on. Little Malcolm.
Yeah.
It's what's going on in Watford at the moment is not exactly Watford, is it? It's kind of like there's stirrings in the air, isn't there? There must be this, the radicalism that's happening even in the centre of town, in
yes,
London.
And Orton, of course. And Simon Gray.
And you didn't do Orton at Watford, did you do Orton at Watford? I don't
yes,
think
we
so.
did. You did Lude.
So in a way, it's a kind of sits in waiting, isn't it?
It sort of was, except that we then attempted to do Watford in Glasgow in the first year and do Stars, and of course it didn't work because they couldn't go home, and £20 a week wasn't enough.
That's the Glasgow factor.
Yeah.
That's different again.
Yeah.
But in essence, I'm wondering whether the sits wouldn't have happened whether you'd gone there or not. Can't say, well, if you'd gone to Glasgow, whether you had gone somewhere else, if you'd gone to Nottingham, if you'd gone to some other theatre.
Now that's interesting. I've always thought that it wouldn't have worked anywhere else, not what we did in Glasgow, because of the audience. The thing that was different was Glasgow. I always remember Sandra Dunbar, who was running the Arts Council at the time, said, I don't really understand what's Glasgow about it. I mean, you're doing plays by English people or German people or French people. Your cast is mostly from England or Ireland or wherever it is. I said, yes, but look at the audience.
David MacDonald is, of course, presumably an influence in this about how to deal with text in that way.
Well, do you know, actually, the real influence, I think, was the first main influence was Keith Hack.
Oh.
Because when I did that Hamlet at the beginning of it, we decided to cut it, and I can remember him sitting down with me and saying, no, that should go, and I suddenly thought, oh yes, it could. And so from then on in, and that's where the adaptations of books and all that, which has been such a vein in my life, came from.
Why did you go to Glasgow anyway?
Well, of course, I had a connection because my father was by this time running the.
You were after all brought up there.
And so from 1953 onwards, I was occasionally going to the Citizens. In fact, strangely enough, the only time I saw the Deep Blue Sea, which I'm seeing next Thursday, was at the Citizens. So I knew the theatre. And so when things got a bit tricky at Watford, which was due to a change in the politics of the town council, having been very left-wing, and a very brilliant man called Councillor Amy who became a great friend, brought about the creation of a civic theatre at the Palace and invited me. This is all Watford. A few years later, the colour of the city changed, the town changed, and the new chairman was much less interested in the theatre. So when the Citizens was advertising, I went for the job, knowing Glasgow, and had an interview and didn't get the job.
That's right.
And came back and went on with Watford. And then a year later, things hadn't gone so well in Glasgow, and they got in touch with me again. So that was why I went to Glasgow.
Yeah, and it's, sort of the myth is, you went along and revolutionised and radicalised the Cits. My impression is that actually it wasn't all bad, what was going on there.
Oh, not at all. It had a most distinguished career, the theatre.
I don't just mean the sort of the history of it, going back to Bridie and all that, but I'm actually talking about the immediate period. Now, I know that audiences might have been falling, but actually you've got Arturo,
absolutely.
which I did see.
Day and the Death of Joe Egg.
Day and the Death of Joe Egg.
And some wonderful, yes.
Which were two of the best pieces of theatre of that period.
Yes.
Yeah, so in fact, what was going wrong there was something else, but it wasn't necessarily...
I'll tell you what was going wrong there was the relationship between the board and the artistic director. There was, the work of David William, Ian Cuthbertson, then David William for only 1 year, then Michael Meacham and Michael Blakemore, for 2 years.
Exactly.
And then Robert Cartland for 1 year. And there was some really good work being done, but because it never could get traction.
Yeah.
It was, Blakemore has told that story, of course, in his books too, about working there. And they had the board some of whom had been on there with Bridie, you see. And of course, Bridie was never the artistic director. He was the chairman, I think. And thus they had got into the sort of habit that the chairman chose the plays, because he was Bridie was, of course, the main creative force in the theatre, and he imported a director to direct for him, but I think the decisions were all made by him. So the board slightly still had race memories of being a time when they dictated what happened, and of course a new generation of what they would sort of call uppity, we artistic directors were coming along and saying, no, we'd like to choose the plays. And I think it was that it was two different ways of looking at how you run a theatre. I think it was as simple as that, and there was a clash between, Cuthbertson actually, then David William, then the Michaels, then Cartland. They were all, in some sense, had a problem and left, or were pushed actually. And I honestly think that they thought that would happen with me. And at the end of my first year, instead of them getting rid of me, they left.
Yes.
With imprecations in the Glasgow Herald that they had been driven out by recalcitrant artistic directors, including the present incumbent. Well, the first thing was I was in a firestorm because the demise of my predecessor, Robert Cartland, had been particularly badly handled. And there was a great deal of talk in the press at that time, which I was able to sidestep because I hadn't been in no part of it. I mean, he wasn't sacked to appoint me, but there was a great deal of talk about who are these people who run this theatre? Are they appointed? Which they weren't. They were it had originally been friends of Bridie's, and which was, of course, when you're starting it in 1943, that's perfectly reasonable, in fact, probably rather sensible. But of course, a bit later, then you begin to have public accountability becomes important. And in a sort of way, I think the way it went was, what right have these people who have nothing to, who aren't publicly accountable, to get rid of somebody? So I did run into that straight away, but it didn't. That particular problem didn't actually impinge on me or on us, I should say.
I mean, interestingly, in the first year, you've got all of the sort of strains that we're going to get later on. The very first one, of course, Milk Train,
yes.
Which you'd done before, I think.
No,
that was the first.
No, I had done Sweet Bird of Youth.
Sweet Bird of
but
Youth.
But this was again a British premiere.
Okay.
With Constance Cummings. No.
Your idea? Must have been.
Well, it had grown out of Sweet Bird of Youth. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then you've got your version of Liaison Dangereuse, and you've got Edward Albee, you've got Nick, so you've got the Nicholas Nickleby going on, presumably roughly about the same time at the RSC.
No,
that was later.
Before.
You
were
were
before. Yes,
before.
And that was done by Ned Sheridan and Carol Brahms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Bit of OKC, which appears again and again and again, and Ebb Tide, which you've referred to, which you did earlier. Bernard Shaw. In other words, you've got, you're beginning to chart the territory, and then of course you hit Hamlet. We've got a few others.
That's an enormous break in every sense.
Hamlet. Now okay. So look, this is the thing. Hamlet. How conscious of you was this? Like a challenge? Was this you throwing the gauntlet down?
No, I don't think it was. This bit has been record it actually,
sure.
but I will just nip over it. What happened
Okay.
was we tried the first year, in a sense, to do roughly what we'd done at Watford, which was have big names and do a sort of very Catholic thing. And we then decided, and it was very constant, it was Philip and me slightly more than David at that time because he was away, that we would, what we discovered at the end of the first lot was we did, as you'll see, Look Back in Anger and The Importance of Being Earnest. And I had wanted to end that year with the production of The Balcony, and the board voted me down, which was quite an interesting story. And there was a lot of, Giles, we don't have votes around the table. You'll take the feeling of the meeting that we really don't think we can let you do The Balcony. And I said, no. I very surprisingly for me, I said, no, I would really like a vote. And I said, actually, if you leave it to me, I will do it. If you vote me down, I won't do it. And they had a vote, and it was 4-5, which was interesting. So I said, fine, I won't do it. So I changed that, and Ellen Sheehan came up to Glasgow to be one of the parts in The Balcony, and I met her in the car park and said, you're playing Cicely in The Importance of Being Earnest. Gwendolyn, it was really as quick as that we changed, but which it really was true. Because I'd cast The Balcony, or I'd cast a bit of it anyway. But the point about that was really interesting, was that we did Look Back in Anger very, very straight. It was actually quite good, but it was very straight. And we did The Importance, and Philip did a real number on it. It was absolutely gorgeous looking, but by no means conventional. And I mean, Cicely looked like Mae West, and the wonderful Ambrosine Philpotts played Lady Bracknell. But what was interesting was that it wasn't a conventional, very far from a conventional Importance of Being Earnest. It looked absolutely ravishing. And what we took from that was that they liked the classics more than they liked Colombe by Ennui, which was an entirely respectable thing to do, or any of the other stuff we did. They really flocked in to see those. And it didn't matter if you did an unconventional version. That was the trick, that we'd done two side by side. One very straight, did very well. One not very straight, did very well too. And so when what we decided, and I don't know how much of this was conscious at the time, but I think it was, that we would get a group of young actors together so we could pay them less, so we could have more of them. We would get a group together and we would do a series of the best known plays you'd ever heard of, but done in unconventional ways. And that's why it was Hamlet, Mother Courage, The Taste of Honey, She Stoops to Conquer, Waiting for Godot, The Hostage, Streetcar Named Desire, Twelfth Night, The Balcony, in that first year. And that was the idea of it. Does that answer your question?
Tell me in what way they were unconventional then. Because you didn't have guys in jockstraps in the first year, did you?
No, that's right. In the first year we didn't, but when we got to Hamlet, we did.
I know that's the point at which it all hell
breaks
breaks
loose.
Well,
it all changed in that summer.
But I'm curious as to what was unconventional in the first year then.
No, nothing very much.
Well, that's
not at all.
Oh, I see.
That's the point I'm making.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. The importance of being earnest was not done as it usually is done with the two rooms and the garden.
Just on that then. So what was special about it? Was this Philip's design?
Yes, and it was like, it was very white, and it had a great pillar in the middle, and it had a sort of Art Nouveau thing at the beginning, so it didn't really sort of change very much, and it was, but it wasn't what you'd expect if you went to The Importance of Being Earnest. I mean, probably quite a small step away from that, but a significant step.
So what precipitates Hamlet
then? Moving on, working with young people.
Yes, because you want to get these young guys.
And the only way we could, as it were, afford to have enough people to do those plays to do the big plays was to have a young company, all paid the same and all paid not very much.
And did that impact on you as well, not just in economic terms, but because you were dealing with young people who presumably... Because I was rather struck by something David Heyman says about the fact that offstage, there he was with his earring and his kind of slightly agendered view of himself, wearing, like so many kids at that time did. It was part of the street fashion. It was part of a way of life. It was a challenge. It was anti-Vietnam. There was
right.
There was a whole thing going on. And I wondered if that culture, which you were bringing in, just inadvertently perhaps by bringing young people in, just affected what you were doing anyway.
Well, I think also that the impact on Glasgow was much greater, because although we were by this time in 1970, with the start of the company, or 71, the 60s hadn't really happened in Glasgow. A bus queue I always say there's a bus queue in 1969 or 70 in Glasgow looked very like a bus queue in 1959. And David used to say, if you see someone in flared trousers and long hair, there'll be an actor at the Citizens Theatre. And I think that one of the reasons that the Hamlet was so contentious was merely it was a rather kind of sharp impact of a new way of looking at things on somewhere that hadn't moved on to that. I think I don't think it was that revolutionary, but it was revolutionary in somewhere that hadn't sort of... And the reason they hadn't had the 60s was, of course, it had been so unprosperous, because there wasn't any work, because people were, it was such a deprived community.
Well, the UCS work, the work in Clyde shipbuilders was 70, 71,
yes,
round about then.
The work in.
Yes.
I mean, it was a very deprived city at that point.
Yes, well, as you can see from the sort of footage, when we see you sitting with the gaubles coming down around your ears and the sort of, all of that.
Yeah.
And were you right that in that first year, when did Bill Taylor come in as chair?
He actually came in the interim between the two, because the ex-chairman left at the end of the first year.
Okay.
And they scurried round to think who they have as a chairman, and he had been on the board actually as a representative of the council. I was wrong to say they weren't representative. They weren't very representative. And they... the famous story is they took him behind a screen in the office and said, "Would you like to be chairman?" And he had just come off being leader of the council at Glasgow Council and had other things he wanted to do, and he said yes. So the baptism of fire for him was that the very first production under his chairmanship was Hamlet. And famously, he wasn't there at the opening night.
Oh, no.
And of course, the next day, the dramaturg and the general manager resigned in the Glasgow Herald from the theatre as a result of Hamlet. And he came back from a holiday, I think a trip somewhere. And he was met at the airport by the journalist.
That's right, I did hear that.
And he said, "I haven't seen it." And then they buttonholed him when he came out of the theatre. And this was so brilliant. He said, "My wife did not enjoy it at all. Yeah. My teenage son loved it, and I'm a little bit between the two."
Yes.
So brilliant. I definitely thought my job was on the line. I definitely, yeah.
They were paying for it.
And the thing that really bothered the board, and of course, and the chairman is away, was these resignations of these important people within the theatre, and so they went to the local authority, and we had a meeting. We were summoned, and I thought, this is really to the local, and I can see it absolutely. Sorry, this is very anecdotal. Is this all right?
We want it.
Yeah, and it was taken by. Oh God, sorry, old moment, name gone. But she was the chancellor, the finance person of the council, but was also on the board. It was Ellen McCulloch. How could I ever forget her name? I owe her my job, and I owe her the next 30 years of my life. And she came in, and she was. And you remember in those council rooms, and I think there was always a huge chair for the person who was the chair. And I can see her coming in, And she put, because she was quite small, she put a handbag at the back of the chair so that she could sit forward, do you know what I mean? And there was a certain amount of talk about it too. Obviously there's a problem at the Citizens because there's been this outburst and so on and so on. And I can absolutely, I'll hear it to my dying day. Well, I liked it. And I thought, well, we're home. We're okay. We've won that round.
Yeah, but...
And of course, by this time, you're not too bothered dealing with it because you're busy rehearsing Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in 2 weeks. So all that was going on. And that's one of the things that I think is so interesting, that all those first productions were just 2 weeks. I think we opened at the end of, yeah, I know. And so that was that. And so, no, it was a clash of cultures.
But you are renowned, aren't you, for not doing the European thing of, 8 weeks, 12 weeks rehearsal, get them on, get them up very fast. And this may be to do with the rep training, but it's also to do with economics. It's all about economics, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Or is there an artistic choice? If you did have longer, I do seem to remember where I was at the Sits, you saying, what would I do with the extra 3 weeks?
Well, it was very interesting. I always remember Philip saying, there are very few directors in England who would really know how to deal with an 8-week rehearsal period, which is both a compliment and not.
Sure. On this issue of how you held it all together. Now, okay, you had these young people coming in, but there was you at the core going, come on, we're not going to go, we're going to stay, we're going to see this through.
I don't think it was ever quite as conscious. I think it was, let's just do the next production and see how it all shakes out. And how's the box office going?
Well.
Because, of course, we always kind of realised that if we could keep that going, I mean, that was the reason we always tried to make a surplus, well, because I thought that, you see, the whole business of the struggle with the board was something that I was anxious to avoid, obviously, because the tradition was so bad on that front. But I always realised that if you could balance the books and weren't going into financial trouble, then their reasons for criticising were much less. They couldn't then say, and what about doing Romeo and Juliet, which is what you want to avoid.
We did skip 2 years in the National Service.
Yes, the significance of that was merely apropos what you were saying about leadership and so on. That having gone to a school that's meant to teach leadership and them saying to me, you don't really have any, you don't have those qualities. I then went into the army, and there was the moment where we went to a thing called a WOSB, which was the War Office Selection Board, where everybody went who wanted to be an officer during the 2-year national service. And everybody who wanted to be, you could apply to be, and I was in a sort of cadre where we were all public school boys and we all wanted to be officers, so we all went to WOSB, and it was quite surprising how some people didn't get it. Rugby captains from major schools just didn't make it, and that was quite a big surprise to me, that I did make it. I don't think I thought necessarily I would, but I did, and therefore I was then trained to be an officer. And then when I was commissioned, by chance, the work I got mostly was administrative. I was with 4 officers who ran the recruitment process for the regiment, which meant we had 400 or 500 people under our thing who would come in from the outside world in national service, leaving wives, children, 3-piece suites on the HP and all this, and we had to deal with that. And so one was absolutely put into although I was far and away the junior person in that little team of 4, inevitably you do a hell of a lot of work. So I emerged from that, not only having been told I could run things, but having run things, and I wouldn't say that, being part of a team that was running something quite complex. And that gave me the confidence, really, to think I could run things.
And Christopher Small, your arch enemy in the first instance, then swings around on your next production.
Yeah,
which is Rosencrantz.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you're beginning to start...
But then you see, it's very interesting that I always think that... I think Philip's view probably was that in a way that let them off the hook. That it was, we didn't really mean it. We're really... Because it was a very beautiful production designed by Bob Ringwood. But it was, in the end, it was a conventional production of a conventional play. And I'd be interested to know, but I think slightly his thought was that it let the people who want, instead of banging on from Hamlet, we, as it were, withdrew from it a bit. But then again, I don't know. So what I mean is that it's a two-edged sword, that. And they both did very good business. Yeah.
You're also, I mean, we know that you've sort of nurtured half of the talent in British theatre. I mean, we know that. It's just come through the sits, and some great stars and great actors. But also on the directorial and the design front, it's a similar thing going on. I mean, I'm very curious that you had Rob Walker. Was he your assistant?
Yes. No,
and Keith Hack. You had these kind of like immense talents.
Yeah.
Who, just by chance, again, I don't believe it was just by chance. How did they come to be in the picture? And
Rob came to us the first year. You see, when we were doing this rather conventional stuff in the Citizens, in the Close, he was going crazy, doing amazing things.
Yeah, Sensi.
The Sensi.
Sensi, is that what you call it?
And Lemuel Pitkin, what was that one called? And he did Arabelle, and I mean, he did a mass of very odd, quirky things, and he had his own little company there. And then Keith joined us actually for the Hamlet and then stayed on and was a wonderful director. I mean, a really, really major director.
What makes a really, really great director?
Well, just makes the play really sing, I think. I mean, Keith's stuff, the Danton, I mean, the brilliant combination. He and Philip were an amazing combination. I mean, Keith was an extremely tricky and difficult man and it all went wrong. But when he was on song, which was particularly Danton's Death,
which is the one that I think the press swung round on, didn't they?
Danton's Death and the Tamburlaine.
Yeah.
Really. And he did some marvelous work.
What do you think is creative vision? Is it people? Is it just that facility with text? I mean, it's all of these things.
Yeah, it is. It's all. I mean, I think I would say creative vision. Yeah, that if you've got just that touch that can make a script completely come to life, and I mean, we all know it when we see it, don't we? You know, you go to a really good production, or you go to Oh, What a Lovely War. You just know.
So you're never just the servant.
No, I don't think so. Or perhaps you always are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's dialectical, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
Yes, yeah, quite.
Nicholas Nickleby was our first Christmas during the conventional bit in 1969-70.
Not exactly pantomime, though.
No, it wasn't,
maybe.
because the Citizens had abandoned pantomimes and done other things, including Lock Up Your Daughters, actually, being the musical they did the year before. Right. And we decided to do Nicholas Nickleby as a kind of holding operation because we'd already done pantomimes at Watford, and, well, indeed, the Mike Palin, Terry Jones Aladdin we did it at Watford. And so when we got the company, we decided to go back and reinstate panto at the Citizens. And that was what we did.
And so you've got this kind of high art, low art thing going on.
That's right. Paolo Dionisotti as Aladdin.
And of course, the wonderful thing is that they're both mixed up. You've got your sort of elegance and style applied to the pantomime, and then you've got the pantomime applied to the classics. No, that's a bit crude, but do you know what I mean? It's a mixture.
Absolutely.
There's a mixture of styles.
Good. Very good.
Yeah.
And of course, they're both styles are based on a really sinewy theatricality.
Yes, which is what Glasgow is bringing to you as well, isn't it? Your audience.
Yeah.
You know, let everybody through the door. Not let everybody. I mean, the doors are wide open. We know about you standing at the door, you know, and meeting everybody, but also this kind of very, very important. I mean, you wanted free theatre, didn't you? You wanted it to be absolutely free.
We did once go. We even budgeted it that we wanted to have a threepenny theatre.
That would have been something, wouldn't it?
And
wow.
And and actually would have been, even if it had got that far, it would have been extremely difficult for the Arts Council, because the funding, which I didn't realise, but funding from the government to the Arts Council for the arts was posited on the fact that this would be a subvention to provoke income.
Right.
I.e., it was not to give it for free in the theatre, I think. And also, oddly, Bill Taylor drew the line at that. It's interesting. That 50p was an inspiration of Philip's. Absolutely an inspiration.
So
I mean,
clever.
it was so
witty
clever.
and clever.
And the real thing about that was that in the year that followed, we not only got more people in, which you would understand, but we made more money. The tiered system that we had, which was just a conventional system, I mean, I think it was at £1.70, you know what I mean? We actually, and Anne Bonner has done a paper on that actually, that the secret was that by reducing, we not only got more people, we made more money.
It's sort of very hard to hold in your head, this idea, you know, and the distance between you and Glasgow and the absolute lack of any distance.
Yes,
you know.
I think, oddly enough, you know, it was something that was never ever raised, that, the whole gay issue. And of course, there was, I suppose, in the 1960s, late 60s, there was a lot of homophobia. No more in Glasgow than anywhere else, I think. And one has to remember that the Close was in fact a gay club. I mean, it was a gay, no, I tell a lie, it was a gay bar. It was a club, you had to join it, but it was unquestionably a gay bar. I mean, God knows. I mean, I always, when it used to go wrong, I say, oh, God sent me on earth to run a gay bar. So there was that. But also, I think it's going back to what we talked about earlier. I think that whole question of what you're saying about the apparent distance, but the nearness, was due to this whole very simplistic Reader's Digest concept that I have, that in the Scottish, and particularly the Glaswegian culture, there is this clash between Mary Queen of Scots and John Knox. And the raffishness and the glamour and the excitement and the gold jockstraps and the makeup and the beautiful people is the Mary Queen of Scots bit, but the fact that it's all based on morally founded work occupies the other. And I think that is what, I mean, yes, I think there was a sense that I don't think actually the Glaswegians cared one way or the other what the hell we were. I think they just cared what we put on stage. And we didn't put actually a lot of gay culture on stage, although there was often quite a lot of gay strands running through what we did.
There was a sensibility. I mean, that's what
I think
is the word.
That's
the word I always think of.
They found acceptable.
Scottish writers?
Oh, Scottish writers. Well, of course, we didn't do well by them.
Not heavily thought of.
Ask David Harrower. And we didn't until we got the studios, at which point much more started to happen. The little studio in the last 10 years that we were there.
You just didn't think it was good enough? You didn't think it was good enough,
well,
or it wasn't appropriate?
Actually the real point was, it wasn't we didn't do new Scottish plays, we didn't do new plays, except plays by David, which we did do some of, but then they were created round what was going on. And I think, you know, Philip used to say, honestly, in our playlist, it's got to be as good as Aeschylus. And that includes Sailor Beware, which absolutely is as good as Aeschylus. Do you know Madame Louise, when we sort of went what some people describe as off message, you know, when you do something from a completely populist background. Yeah, so no, that I always defended that. And also don't forget that the big upswing in New Scottish writing was much later. In fact, there's an argument that we helped create that, because we created an exciting theatre, so people started thinking about theatre and thinking about writing it. I mean, I think I'd be torn limb from limb if I said that publicly, but I think it may have been.
When do you think is the next great moment? When I say the great moment, there are lots of great moments, and that's why I think one can get Hamlet out of proportion. It's because of what it represented socially. But theatrically, can you spot where you think there's a leap forward in sort of citizens' theatre culture? Because
I mean, you can pick out ones like the Proust, which was obviously a sort of watershed.
That's way down the road, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
not that far down.
No, 81 was it?
Well, okay, no, 10 years down. I mean, that's, you've established. You're there now. Of course, I always think that one of the big steps forward was when the two little studios were created in 1992. I always think where we started doing completely different things and brought in many more new directors and whole new ideas and so on. We paid our dues in a way to Scottish writing, often in perhaps a rather different way from having a new Scottish play. I mean, Trainspotting is Aeschylus. Yes.
So is the Wasp Factory, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. And these are major pieces.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Do you think? Look, there is something I only discovered recently, which is the significance of Nottingham. Now, I don't want to talk much about Nottingham, other than they did try and nick you, didn't they? I mean, didn't Richard Eyre, after he went, which was at the end of the 70s?
When he was leaving to go to the National.
You could have gone.
Yes.
And I know that, and as far as I understand it, it's because you wanted to take the administration as well, or you wanted to take your general manager.
Yeah.
They said no.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah, really.
But you were tempted. You were tempted.
Yes.
Why?
Well, I tell you, even earlier than that, I don't know whether this answers your question. Funny enough, I was thinking about it because I've just been connected with a West Country theatre company that is doing Travels with My Aunt at the moment. And I went to Exeter, and the previous time I'd been to Exeter was to be interviewed for the Northcote Theatre in something like 1970, 1971, as early as that. Well, you put it, I mean, the going was rough. If one could have found somewhere to do it, you had to, and also, how long was I going to last? How long were we going to be allowed to stay there? So you had to just keep your eye on the ball. And I always remember going to the interview, and we went into this room, and there was a lawn with a squirrel. And I thought, oh yes, and then thought, Gorbals, Glasgow, Sauchiehall Street, lawn, squirrel. And I mean, it wasn't that I turned it down. I didn't get offered the gig. No, actually Nottingham was a little bit of a turning point, because we then faced the fact that we'd worked so hard to achieve so many things in Glasgow, and to have to start all over again, doing them again in Nottingham, would be kind of pointless. But again, you didn't know how long it was going to last. One of the great things about Glasgow was it was so geographically far away. We were not in any way influenced by, you couldn't say, oh, they're not as good as the Royal Shakespeare, or that they were irrelevant to us. We created our own world. Yes. It was in a way more significant to what was happening at the Lyceum than what was happening at the National Theatre. The other side of that was, of course, you get away with murder, because, I mean, people say to me, oh, I hear it was absolutely wonderful. And I think, well, sometimes it was god-awful,
yes.
And we were, but I think that was something that very much struck on Philip's box, was that we weren't in any way connected with British theatre as it was thought of, the National, the Royal Shakespeare, the Royal Court. It wasn't that we turned our back on them particularly, they were irrelevant to us. We were creating entirely our own world, and we were in a community which was also so far cut off from that we could do our own thing.
Also must have driven you completely bloody crazy, wasn't it? That you didn't get that on the other, not that you didn't get the National, the RSC, but you also didn't get the full acclaim.
Well, of course, then there was the time that we did. you know, when finally, I mean, of course it did piss me off and pissed us all off that we knew we were doing better work than we'd done at Watford, and at Watford we'd got everybody. I mean, we had national press for The Milk Train Doesn't Stop Here, for Sweet Bird of Youth, and for other things that we did. I mean, the press came down all the time after a bit, but then, and then they wouldn't come in Glasgow, and then suddenly they all came all the time. I mean, we just
when?
I would say the 80s, really. And I mean, it's all the scrapbook. I mean, so much so that one just wouldn't know. I mean, I would know probably if Michael was in, but I wouldn't necessarily know if the others were in. And that was spearheaded by Michael, actually.
Did that change what was going on in a way? You know, there's a point at which I was also reminded of Dudley Sutton. I was going to say, at what point do you stop being anti-establishment and you become part of it in a way?
Well, that's a good question, but we never became, I don't think we ever really became part of the British theatre establishment.
No.
I mean, there'll be the books about books written about the 70s, 80s and 90s in British theatre don't even mention us.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
How shocking is that? It's sort of extraordinary.
But that's the nature of the game, isn't it?
And
you can't have it both ways.
No, but that's interesting.
You can't have the independence, the isolation, and the privilege of doing completely your own thing, and expect the general, as it were, acclaim. We survived in Glasgow based on our Glasgow audience, and we were always very, very sure that even a rave review in the Financial Times from Michael Coveney probably added 2 seats. Do you know what I mean? I think that we were always very geared to what effect these were really having. Of course it had an effect.
It's not Broadway and Ben Brantley and all that.
Exactly. Well, except that, yes, in a way the Glasgow Herald was much more important than the Times.
Philip's Threepenny Opera, 78. Philip's Threepenny Opera.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Rather wonderful. I was in it. I was the lady of the house, dressed as Queen Mary, looking very, very elegant, playing the piano, and my servants brought me supper, and then they revolted, called in all their friends, and beat me up and murdered me. That was the structure.
Not that I recall that from the text of the Threepenny Opera, however, I'm sure
every word of the Threepenny Opera was
in there. Yeah. I know it would have been because of the bloody Brecht Foundation and all that.
Yeah.
Yes, well, okay.
No, you see, that was one of the great things about that, was that we were so far away that they didn't care. It was only when Glenda Jackson was doing it that the Brecht granddaughter arrived and disapproved of the hymn tunes for the songs and all that.
There's incidentally a very strong case that the best rock and roll happened outside of London.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All of these corners where nothing else was going on.
When we did Galileo and one of the male parts was played by a woman and all this. No, I mean, that was the great thing about the Brecht estate, is they left us alone because they couldn't have cared less. And also because we gave them a lot of money, because all the shows we did were very successful. Brecht was good box office in Glasgow. Brecht was really an interesting case because he had a real following in Glasgow which had been picked up on by my predecessors. I saw a wonderful production of the Gulran Sets one. There was then, in Cuthbertson's time, a really famous, a production that people kept on mentioning, of the Caucasian Chalk Circle. And in the year immediately prior to me, they actually did the Vision of Simone Marchard, which nobody does. Okay, so we arrived and found, as it were, there was fertile ground. The audience knew about Brecht and cared about him, which you couldn't have said in any other city in Britain at that time. And also you had Rob Walker, Keith Hack, and by implication David, who were mad Brechtians. So it was just so easy. You just did Mother Courage, and then In the Jungle of the Cities, and the St. Joan of the Stockyards, and we just did them, and the Threepenny Opera. We just kept on doing them, and they kept on being good business. And I think the other thing was we were absolutely prepared to cut and change and shape and make them accessible. There was even a moment when we were asked to go to Edinburgh.
Yeah. Really?
And there was even I floated this idea that the two should be run together.
So Lyceum sits. Wow.
But my idea was that we should start something. It wouldn't always be at the Citizens. You would start some things at the Citizens that would then tour to the Lyceum, and you'd start some things at the Lyceum that would tour to Glasgow. And it was always, this is against the background of dwindling resources. I thought it was rather an exciting idea, actually.
But nothing to do with the National Theatre, not a nascent National Theatre.
No, that wasn't even on the cards at that time.
Yes.
I can't remember what date that actually was, but we because there was obviously no point in going. They approached me about the Lyceum job, and which is an odd thing to do in reflection, but never mind, they did. And I came up with this idea that maybe they could be run in tandem, and that economically would have made rather good sense, and each would have fed the culture of the other. I thought it was a rather interesting idea, but that was. Yeah.
The idea of Glasgow and Edinburgh sort of, joining hands.
And then there was yet another idea was that at one point that we should gang up with shared experience.
Oh.
And that in a way...
After Mike Alfred's or before?
After. That they would become the kind of touring southern wing of the Citizens.
What did you do down there?
I did...
you did Pamela
the Richardson. Yes. And then I did The Heat of the Day by Elizabeth Bowen. It's a wonderful, wonderful play about the Second World War in London. She lived in London during the Blitz, and she wrote a book about it. Marvellous book about what it was like to do the same walk the next day and find half the houses gone and the people who were in them dead.
And was opera sidelined at this stage, or were you doing the odd opera as well?
No, the opera started in the 80s.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
You picked up
I think the first opera was 84. So my first opera, and then of course Philip was doing opera, and indeed David was doing opera, so we all did opera at different times.
Because you had Scottish opera and all that happening in
there. No, I worked for them, and so did Philip. Philip actually designed for them, but didn't. He designed the Jonathan Miller Magic Flute, which they did, and I did 2 shows there. I did Fledermaus and L'Elysée d'Amore, both of which were revived, and L'Elysée revived even again.
Because people talk about the wit of the Citizens, the wit and style and grace, and I was thinking, but it's bigger than that, actually. There's something more profound in the nature of theatre itself, the comedy, tragic masks.
I mean, I suppose even, David Hayman as Lady Macbeth has an element of that.
Okay, why did you cast that?
Well, it was again, it was probably money, but I think it was what we were trying to do was to replicate. We had exactly the same number of actors that Shakespeare had, so we said we would do that, but we would do it with just with men, and I was in Glasgow last week, and a taxi driver we were talking, and he said, in the end, "Were you one of those 3 who ran the Citizens?" And I said, "Yes." He then talked about Brecht, and he then talked about David Hayman as Lady Macbeth. How about that?
Amazing.
Last Wednesday, a week ago today.
Let's look at this cross-casting. So David Hayman as Lady Macbeth, 78 or thereabouts, yes?
Yeah.
Jonathan Hyde as Lady Bracknell.
Yes.
Yeah. Jane Burtish as Mattie, because you did one of Puntilla and Mattie. Gerald Murphy as Miss Prism.
Miss Prism. Earlier on, Paolo Dionisotti as the Dauphin in St. Joan, the St. Joan you were talking about. Even more to the point, John Dartine as Yvette in Mother Courage, the aforementioned one with Anne Mitchell.
So...
Well, originally it arose out of, we've got 18 actors, we've got 2 theatres to fill, you just simply put, it doesn't matter that it's John Dartine playing Yvette.
So there's, many ways of looking at this, and many things that it sort of sparks off. I'm just wondering what it sparks off for you, why you do this. Is it just because, it's always been done that way, hasn't it? I mean, that's the way that Shakespeare was done. Is it to do with that grand tradition?
I don't think it's to do with that. I think
pantomime?
It's best actor in the role, really, yeah. And does it, I think it's that thing, these people are acting, or as David MacDonald said, it's so significant that we call it playing.
Yeah, that's the same word.
And there you are.
Yeah, totally.
So what was nice about it was that it became something that wasn't remarked upon. It just happened. I mean, I don't think anybody mentioned really that Jane was mad. In fact, although she was very good, it actually probably wasn't a very good idea, because one of the central things in that is a kind of sexual thing between Celia Imrie, as it was, and her. But I think it was that I couldn't find a guy who I thought would do it right.
I mean, do you think any role in theatre can be played by anybody?
Your Tempest, I always think about that. I always think of Your Tempest with your Lady Prospero.
So that's okay, because lots of critics did not like that.
Yeah, but
well, they said, well, there's no father-daughter relationship here, is there?
Well, no, there isn't. Well, or there is if but is that the only thing about The Tempest? And do you not gain? I mean,
So let me rephrase the question. Is there any reason?
I think you've got to be a bit careful, and I think that it makes it less accessible to people who don't know it. If you do, if you have a Lady Prospero, I think. Well, actually, no, it didn't. But did you see when Neil did the all-female, not all-female, but the 12th Night, where the Aguicheek and Toby were played by women?
Nope.
It didn't really add anything.
But that's what I wonder. Sometimes they don't. I mean,
sometimes
and again,
it doesn't.
what about the Philida Lloyd, the all-female Julius Caesar?
I didn't see that, but apparently that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, good director, good actors.
Yeah. You get on with it.
Good play.
Yes. Yeah. I just don't think it's an issue, really.
Yeah.
And which is what I feel about a black and white casting too.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
So
Jeff Kissoon as Goneril, and
Okay, let's have a look at this business of acting. Now, you've already talked about playing out to the audience as being sort of intrinsic to, well, what was it, intrinsic to theatres, making a connection with the audience?
Intrinsic to certain types of play, I think, yeah.
So not all plays, you can't do all plays that way.
No, I mean, if you're doing some things in a small studio theatre, you don't want people playing out, you want them just playing here because we can all see them. I think a lot depends on the space in which you're doing it.
Well, what about?
And of course, the citizens. I mean, one has to say, is being. Funny enough, I've just been on email about this to Richard Pilbrow. Do you know who I mean?
Yeah.
Who's just done a tour of the Cits, arranged through me last week, and just said, "What an amazing auditorium."
Well, it is.
Yeah.
Philip did say that, didn't he? It's the best in the world.
Yeah.
Best in Britain.
Best drama theatre in Britain.
You brought something else to the picture, which is why I'm sort of always wary of that critique, because you're a teacher of drama. You teach
and David
opera
also
students.
had a very different relationship with actors. For them, he had a different relationship with actors from the relationship that Philip had or I had. So I think it was three different ways.
Three very different ways.
I mean, Sian Thomas always said that. She said it was so interesting to work in three completely different ways.
What is it you've got to remember as a director? What is it you've got to take with you?
Oh, I would say remember that you're representing the audience.
So the act, again, it comes back to the actors, the audience, two crucial things.
I mean, it was what David said, or Philip, I think, I can't remember which one it was. There are only two lots of people who are important, the actors and the audience. The rest of us are their servants, directors, designers, and so on.
Yes, it was ironic.
I always remember David saying, we have to remember that words are what the actors say, just as costumes are what they wear.
Yes. What do you look for in a good actor, or in a good? Yes. What do you look for in a good actor? How do you know how to cast?
Now I've got a story back from that one. Tom Stoppard was asked that question, and he said, "Clarity of diction." And of course, they were mortified. Of course. Because they all were thinking he would say emotional truth, insightful characterization, clarity of diction.
And that's for you as well?
Well, I think it's also being interesting and having something interesting to say about the person you're playing, who we hope is interesting.
So bringing something to the party, you're looking for that in actors.
Yes. I always thought when Philip chose so brilliantly as he did at auditions, it was, I mean, as somebody said, in the early days, they can't speak, they knock over the furniture, but they're interested. You know, Philip said, I don't care. I don't care if he can actually act. I'm interested in seeing him do something for me. I'll pay to see that person on the stage.
Indeed. But
and sometimes brilliant actors would come, really achieve. And Philip would say, I know he's marvellous, but I'm not interested.
But that's not you, is it? That's not your view.
Well, it is. I'm easily fooled by the two, which he isn't. I'm easily held by the technique. I think, oh my God, that's so clever doing that. And I don't actually think he's rather a boring person doing it.
And how much of you... Yeah, no, go on.
Go on.
I was going to say, how much of you as an actor influences? Because it's what you do as well.
Yeah.
King Philip.
Well, I think... Yes, I, of course, enjoyed working I mean, I worked with Philip much more than I worked with David, but I didn't find any problems at all in his style. And this thing about, you know, he just tells you to sit in the chair and doesn't tell you anything. I didn't think it was true, actually. I found if you listen carefully, he was telling you really quite a lot about what it was about and so on. I was rather... slightly, not mortified, but at the 70th birthday of the Citizens, Rupert Everett did a speech, and it was mostly about Philip, which was absolutely right. He said, you know, David's gone, Giles is here in person, let me tell you about Philip, who isn't here, and why isn't here, and so on. But all the stories were like the Cal McInerney playing Hamlet and ringing Philip up a month before rehearsal starting, saying, do you think we could go over the soliloquies together? And Philip saying, no, darling, I'm sure it'll be marvellous. And he told a lot of those stories, which are very easy to tell. And then apparently rehearsing the nunnery scene, Rupert told this story, brought the house down, of course, and Philip was moving it around, and Cal turned and said, but Philip, it says I love her. And Philip said, lunch? You see, now, of course, they're very easy stories to tell. And of course, there's a grain of truth. But actually, I found, and I did, I must have done half a dozen plays with him, and I never found that. And I wasn't saying off stage, oh, by the way, darling, tell me about that, because we never talked about the play, or about that at all. I just found, if you listened, he was telling you. And I think it was exaggerated, and also that story about the soliloquies, in actually saying, Cal, you're an intelligent man and you are a good actor, your take on the soliloquies will be fine, and there's probably not much I, as the director, can add beyond putting him in the right place to say them.
Yes, although once again, that's him. It's not you, though, is it?
No, probably not. Probably not. I don't know.
Are you quite a directive director? Never having been in a rehearsal?
Yes, no, very. Very. I mean, I had to say to the, I mean, this is what was, just this thing I've done at RADA, and indeed the Macbeth, I had to say to them, you know, I'm laying it on the line with you. And I'm sure you must think I have no say in this at all. I'm being moved where I have to, I'm being told how to say the line in a certain way. And I said, you know, if you're with certain directors, they'll do that, and it's your job to fill in the gaps. And bring your technique to, I mean, if Philip said, sit in the chair on that line, you had to find a way that it was sensible for your character to go and sit, not to go, I can't, or I don't feel like that. I feel I must move right instead of left. You had to think, oh, I see, he wants me to sit in that chair. Now, why would I sit in that chair at that point? Oh, I see, I can think, actually, I'm pissed off with him or something. I mean, I think the RADA people this time did find it quite, and then they got it, you know, and I said, but do you not see that within this structure, this straitjacket, you have huge freedom?
I mean, big question here, Giles, but if you could change the culture of drama schools at all, I mean, you go in there quite a bit, don't you?
Yes.
RADA
well, I only do RADA here.
All right,
yeah.
okay. So
and
you
the
do
National
but you
Office.
used to do RSM, you used to do odd bits and pieces.
Yes.
I mean, you've done, okay. What would you like to see changed? What would you like to see shifted? I mean, what would you like to see taught maybe that isn't?
Well, I think that I join the chorus of people who say, why can't they be heard? But of course, this affects the people at RADA. They're agonising about that all the time. But apparently, I'm interested because somebody said to me that in the new Romeo and Juliet, the Branagh one, you actually can't hear them. And that is not good. You see, at ACT, it's rather interesting because the theatre of the company is a big theatre. It's a bit like the Theatre Royal. It's the Rep Theatre of San Francisco, but it was built in 1910, so it's an Edwardian theatre, and it seats 1,000. And all the kids in the conservatory play in the main theatre. And the thrust of the first 2 years is to make them what they call Geary ready. Geary is the name of the theatre. And they go in there once a term and they do vocal exercises, can they fill the theatre with their voices? Now, of course, most of them are going to work on television where they're going to have a microphone here and they're never going to need that.
Yes.
But actually, come playing Romeo and Juliet at the Garrick, you do need it. And I have to say, I went to the show last night. I thought it was beautifully spoken. I didn't actually enjoy it very much, but it was beautifully spoken. So I just think that emphasis is a good one, and I think they should keep doing it.
This is actually a lot better than I realised as well.
It is good, isn't it? I'm only just sorry that he never finished it. You know, we asked him if he wanted to go to the end of our time from 1990 to 2003.
Rather stops. What a shame. What a shame.
Yeah, I know.
Why did he just, he'd done it?
Yeah. And I think he also thought that he hadn't seen enough in the studios.
Yeah, okay.
That's my great, I mean, all the lovely things people say about it, I'm always sorry that work that we did there for 10 years has not been recognised, because I think that it was in some ways more significant even than the work we did in the 70s. Because I think the variety of what we had, the use of studio theatre in design terms, of just a little black box, a 50-seater and a 100-seater, I think we did remarkable work there. I mean, what the trouble was, it siphoned the energy from the big theatre. Because, I mean, I think you could argue that the Citizens began to lose traction as the studios took it. And actually, funnily enough, the theatre in San Francisco was acquired and indeed now has recreated and built a small theatre, actually in an old theatre in the middle of town, but half the size. And I said to them when they were talking about it, you will find that your energy goes to the small one.
Do you ever stop? You don't seem to.
Yeah, between things, yes, I do. I like to have something coming up to occupy my mind and so on. I do. I mean, I'm glad that I'm going to do Romeo next February, and I've got one or two things in between.
Where are you doing that?
ACT. It's
ACT,
the one
right.
that goes.
Oh, right.
The one that goes to schools again.
Yeah, great. You've got ideas about how to do that, of course. Of course you have, because
I've done it before, actually.
Right. But you won't recreate it. It'll
be
something completely new.
I will do it differently, but it'll be based on the same adaptation. Yeah.
Right. Which is yours.
Yeah.
Your version. Can I ask you just a very personal question about family? Because I think you're a very loyal, I've said that before, you're a loyal person, we know that. You're a very loving family man. You look around the house, you know, there's your family just kind of beaming back at us from the walls kind of thing. And you're very loyal and faithful to old friends, and you've got a million friends. But did you know, about having your own family, it's the cliche, the theatre is your family.
Yes.
But did you make a conscious choice about that?
No. It just happened. It just happened, and I've never quite worked out why that was. No, I don't think I ever said, I'm turning my back on all that, I'm not going to have a partner, I'm not going to have a wife, I'm not going to have a husband, a boyfriend, partner. It just happened.
Because the two things do seem connected somehow, that you've got this unbelievably manic work not just work, but
yes, but then of course I always say, I mean, Trevor Nunn works just as hard as me, and a damn sight harder probably, and has had several wives and lots of children. Do you know, you can't say the work gets in the way of the private life. It's a choice.
Well, I don't know. Let's not go there exactly, because one could also argue that there's a lot of fracture. It's not as though one has a stable...
Peter Hall, I mean, Peter Brook, I mean, they're all family people. They're people who have relationships and have partners. So it's a choice in me. And I don't know...
Let's make the question slightly bigger then. Would you say, could you go back and say, okay, damn, if only I'd have done this rather than that? I mean, do you have, Edith Piaf, no regrets?
No, I really try not to do that. I really try, and I'll tell you why. My father, who was wonderful, really, but he was a terrific regretter. He would suddenly say, if only I had done it. And I always swore that I wouldn't go down that route. So now I'm unbelievably difficult at making up my mind about anything. I go, oh God, buying a bed, or redecorating the walls, or moving house, or doing a journey to the States. It takes me forever. But once I've made up my mind, even if it's a total catastrophe and I've got it totally wrong, that's it. So no, I don't. I mean, of course I regret in some ways that I don't have. Okay, I mean, when I see his beautiful five-week-old, I think, wow, how lovely that would have been. But I think, hey, but I had other things as well. And as I said at the beginning, I have been so unbelievably lucky in my life in every possible way that I can't possibly regret anything.
Are you scared of anything?
Oh God, life really. Going into the rehearsal room the first day. Yeah, of course.
And you said you found your strength in, because you referred to, Philip, I had these other two that I could always go and cuddle with, no, maybe not cuddle, but anyway, go and talk to and share, but where you find your strength outside of that, because they're not there anymore.
No. Friends.
So it's the same.
Yeah, friends, actually, yes. And just wanting to keep going. I mean, it's going to come to an end. We all know this. But my view is, while you can do it, do it. Yes. And then when it stops, that's got to be all right too. What you can't do is think, why aren't they asking me at RADA this year? You can't think that. You've got to think, you've done RADA, darling. And it's interesting, you asked me, were you thinking of it as a stepping stone to the National Theatre, was what you were actually asking.
Possibly.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Of course, but then any actor from days gone by, actors going into rep, it was a stepping stone towards the West End or the National Theatre. It was a progression, wasn't it?
But you don't seem to, you don't reflect this notion that so many of us have, dare I say, of looking over our shoulders and seeing what, the others are doing and are achieving, and
oh God,
I can mention them by
name. When friends of mine get good notices, I go green.
Paul Vidal, yes, part of me dies and all that.
What?
Yes, the worst thing, yes, when a friend of mine achieves, a part of me dies and all that.
Yeah.
Yes, and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
what was it? Who was it who? Oh God, who had got a terrible notice and went to a friend who said, "You've just got to see it this way. You are having a horrible time, but many of your friends are having a lovely time this morning." I remember sitting on the stage at the first night of Travels in Glasgow. Remember, we sat on stage for the last 10 minutes when the audience was coming in, just drinking cups of tea, you won't remember, but we were all three sitting at our places. And I remember thinking, this is the only place in the world I would like to be.